Hello, and welcome to the Mirrored Muse podcast, a sanctuary for the soul and a spark for the revolutionary spirit, where our truth is reflected, our radiance remembered, and our spirit set free. I'm your host, Whitney Amber, and together we'll journey into the depths of what it means to awaken, embody, and expand as the muse of our own life. Through soulful storytelling, raw reflections, guided practices, and revolutionary conversations, this podcast is here to truly meet you in your own becoming. So, let's take a deep breath, soften our edges. It's time to step into the mirror. This is your invitation to rise. Hey, love, welcome back to the Mirrored Muse podcast. Before we dive into this week's episode, I want to make a brief announcement that the Mirrored Muse podcast is going live, y'all. We are looking to host a live podcast recording and women's event in Jamestown, Tennessee. The deets are coming soon, so stay tuned in on our Instagram page at the Mirrored Muse for the official announcement. If you are in the Jamestown, Cookeville, Knoxville, Nashville area, this event is for you and your girls. All moms and nanas are welcome, okay? Think Hometown Heart meets Soul Talk, where women get to gather, listen, feel seen, and light up. Where Small Town Heart meets Big Muse energy, and reflection feels like a revival, okay? If you have any questions, please feel free to DM me on my personal IG, or the team can catch a response over on our community page as well. Okay, now let's pick right back up where we left off last week on emotional sovereignty. You know, emotional sovereignty is something that I've really been sinking into and embodying as the way I want to show up in all relationships in my life. And I truly believe it's the new essential love language and key for loving well. And just to be clear, there is a difference between knowing how to feel and knowing that you are not your feelings, between being emotionally intelligent and being emotionally sovereign. So let's absolutely talk about it, because while they sound like they're sipping the same cocktail, emotional intelligence, aka EQ, and emotional sovereignty are actually different energetic frequencies altogether. Think of emotional intelligence as the awareness component. So this is the understanding and navigating tier. Emotional intelligence is all about recognizing emotions, yours and others. It's about naming them without shame, responding versus reacting, empathizing without merging, and communicating effectively in emotional spaces. Emotional intelligence is the skill of managing emotion, like being fluent in the language of feelings, okay? So, kind of in short and in essence, EQ is I understand what's happening emotionally here and can navigate it consciously. Whereas emotional sovereignty is the embodiment aspect. Now, this one is truly the higher ground. Emotional sovereignty, it's no longer about managing emotion. It's about mastering your center while emotions move through and around you. Emotional sovereignty says, you know what? My emotions belong to me, not to anyone else. It also says, your feelings don't dictate my worth, peace, or choices. Emotional sovereignty says, I can hold my sadness, anger, or love and still choose alignment. Emotional sovereignty is when you stop outsourcing your emotional state to the external world. It's self-governance of your inner world, a kind of emotional divinity, if you will, that doesn't need approval to stand tall or remain in truth. So in short, and in essence of emotional sovereignty, this is and says, I am the authority of my emotional landscape. So that's a little contextual background of the differences between the two. And a very brief illustration is emotional intelligence is the foundation and or prerequisite. Emotional sovereignty is the graduation point. You start by learning to name your emotions and empathize with others. And then we evolve into knowing which emotions are actually ours to hold and which are just visiting or passing through from others. EQ keeps the peace. Sovereignty keeps your power. Oof, oof, oof. I hope I can say that the way I feel it right now. Let me say that one more time. EQ keeps the peace. Sovereignty keeps your power. Emotional sovereignty asks, can I stay with myself even when the world sways? It's holding space for your feelings without letting them hijack your peace. It's truly saying, this sadness can sit beside me in the passenger seat, but it does not drive the car. Think of a time you loved someone so deeply that you almost disappeared completely in the process. Or maybe you did disappear in the process. Maybe you molded yourself to fit their needs, or you made their happiness the GPS for your own direction. And in doing so, you drifted away from the sound of your own voice. Guys, emotional sovereignty is the gentle art of loving without losing yourself. I want to pause right there because if you haven't heard Olivia Dean's new album called The Art of Loving, I know you've heard her single, Man I Need. And if you haven't heard either, guys, get on Spotify, wherever you listen to music, you got to tune in. It's 10 out of 10. Okay, we're back. Emotional sovereignty. It is the gentle art of loving without losing yourself. It's compassion with boundaries. It's empathy with edges. It is the ultimate liberation moment. It feels liberating too when we practice it. When we're emotionally sovereign, we don't suppress what we feel, we steward it. We learn to listen to our emotions like they're wise guests at the dinner table of whatever is unfolding. But we do not hand over the keys to the house, aka our power and our worth. And while this is not a romantic love example, okay, because we're still single, we're not there yet. However, this is very much preparation. I do want to share an example of how this played out in a professional partnership kind of way for me last year, actually. So there was a moment last year when I was consulting where I found myself in a very intense and highly emotionally charged situation, sitting across a conference room table with my colleague, where she decided to angrily shout and express negative thoughts, opinions, and insecurities at me. And these were being presented in a way that said, Whitney, this is who you are, what you lack, and what you are and are not capable of. And just for context, okay, this was a result of the day prior where we both received an email from the client disclosing information that she chose to hide and manipulate for the entire year that we had been working together and on this project. And I had intuitively sensed and felt, even, right after the project began, I really had strong intuitive feelings and prompts, even noticed different things not lining up. And usually when this happens, Whitney, I do not feel the need to armor up. I do not feel the need to demand the truth in any moment or forcefully attempt to shine a light on the situation. Because what I know to be true, and it has been proven time and time and time again in my life experience, is that the truth always comes to the light. So let's just say it was a tremendous lesson, in the department of self-worth, amongst a few others. It was a total and complete shock to my system. It felt like betrayal with a capital B. And all this unfolds right before a big meeting with the client where we were going to be, she was going to be presenting the entire project handover. And so, as a result of all of this unfolding, I chose not to attend the meeting because to me, attending at this point highlighted further betrayal of myself and my core values. And that was something I was not willing to do. I share this little bit of context because the reality is there were all kinds of emotions swirling within me as all of this unfolded. And so now, amongst the intensity of this explosive reaction she chose to display, I also had a choice. And what I knew to my core was everything that she was saying was not at all true or aligned to who I am. And that these words had nothing to do with me at all. And honestly reflected deeply the beliefs, insecurities, and thoughts of how she feels and sees herself. And that was being projected onto me. So in this moment, I just envisioned a glass wall between her and myself so that all of the words that she was saying and all the just explosiveness and reaction stayed with her and never crossed over or reached my field because they were not mine to absorb. And I felt no need to react. I just let her have her moment. And right as she was done, I didn't raise my voice. I did give her the chance and opportunity to be honest about what had been disclosed and what had unfolded. And I also let her know clearly that, this opportunity no longer is aligned with the woman I am. And it's no longer aligned with how I want to show up professionally, period. Now, I will say, this was the very first time I was able to be completely in my sovereignty. And you talk about an empowering place to be, to move, to speak and exist. I needed to give no explanation, just complete centeredness and knowing of who I was in that moment. That's what emotional sovereignty is. And I don't share this example to, paint myself in any type of superior position. No. But I do share this experience because emotional sovereignty is very much a leadership quality. And, while the past few years, everyone's been talking about EQ, emotional intelligence. Well, intelligence and awareness only gets you so far. At what point do we choose to embody it? At what point do we choose to stand in integrity and lead from that place of sovereignty that says, I hear, I see everything that's swirling around me. I know what's aligned to me, and I'm going to remain in that alignment. I'm going to make decisions from that place. Period. That's it. There's no explanation needed. There's no need to fight reaction with reaction or chaos with chaos, because we all know that gets us nowhere, right? So emotional sovereignty is a choice. To embody it in all relationships is like the actual goal. So while this episode is honoring this concept as the new way of loving, I want to make sure we are thinking about it in a way that always includes and requires the way in which we love ourselves. We cannot embody emotional sovereignty without reaching this sovereign level of self-love. This level of self-love that just is sovereignty. It is the centeredness. It's immense self-trust. It's everything we talked about in last week's episode, right? I mean, after all, We can only love others to the extent that we love ourselves. Emotional sovereignty isn't about detachment. It's about devotion with boundaries. It's actually the thing that allows us to lean in safely to connection and love, because it's about loving deeply without dissolving completely. Oh, doesn't that feel good to not only know that that's a possibility, but to know that we can lean in safely to connection and love without losing ourselves? Because I personally used to think love meant losing myself in someone else's orbit, ambitions, dreams, goals, desires. That to be chosen, I had to shrink those very things, or soften, or sacrifice those parts of me that felt too much, too big, too XYZ. But now I know real love, real mature, unshakable love, is when both people still have room to breathe. It's when connection doesn't cost you your center. It actually requires it. Because emotional sovereignty isn't cold or closed off. It's the ultimate act of self-respect. It's compassion with boundaries. It's empathy with edges. It's love that stays open, yet anchored. So another example of this that just recently played out last week with my sister. So for the last several months, even while I was, back traveling and we were all kind of in different directions, the fam and I had been talking about and somewhat planning a trip to Disney World, because my nieces are at such fun ages where they're actually able to, really enjoy and engage with everything and just completely melt at all the magic. And, this is something that we had always talked about doing as a family and together. So my sister would check in about every other month to make sure I still had intentions and was planning to go. And purely to my core, my intentions were always yes, right up until I got back in the States at the beginning of September, and I felt a little more hesitancy, but it was not a clear no. Because what was happening was it started to become very clear that I needed to focus on creating and investing in my business. And the time to do so was now. Well, instead of being open with my sister and communicating this shift with her then in September, I expressed some hesitations, but not in a way of like, oh, I'm owning this hesitation purely for me. What I did was I let the fear of disappointing her drive my decision to just push through and somehow make it all happen, to just keep the peace, which, by the way, is a very antique and familiar way of being in my family. So to avoid disappointing her and facing that reaction, becoming in the most dramatic way the cause of why we didn't go to Disney. And that's what I was telling myself, right? So yeah, I was avoiding disappointing her and facing the reaction. I was committed fully to just going. And it took my mother literally falling and injuring her knee, which led to a conversation at home where she and I were just chit-chatting, and I had just taken her to her doctor appointment to get her knee checked out, and we're back home, we're watching a movie, and she just says, I don't think I need to be going to Disney in a few weeks. I'm not going to be able to enjoy it now. This kind of sucks. I didn't plan for this injury to happen, etc. This is my reality. And so she's talking that through, and in this moment, everything I was and had been avoiding just came right up to my throat. And so I acknowledged the same misalignment with going too. And so later that night, my sister comes in for a visit. I was not in any way looking forward to telling her this information and realization, as I knew she had paid a deposit on the trip. But I eventually tell her, No, of course, it did not go well at all. She was extremely upset, as she had every right to be, which created a kind of storm that really made little Whitney uncomfortable because she was always used to just keeping the peace. However, in the midst of all the emotions, I yet again visualized a glass wall between me and my mom and me and my sister, because I knew to my core that me expressing this to her, this decision was the right decision for me. I also was holding the accountability for not being honest with myself earlier, let alone honest with everyone else about going. And so, while everyone was entitled to have their feelings about it all, they just were not mine to take on or absorb in that moment. And so by visualizing these glass walls, that's my way of not absorbing. And let me tell you, emotional sovereignty hits different when interacting with family, okay? Especially when boundaries are like a foreign language. Like boundaries have never really been a part of our track record and the narrative and the silent push for keeping the peace at all costs. And in the sake of upholding this other cultural belief inherited that says family above everything, family is always the exception to the rule. I challenge these. Because let's be honest, if we are not loving and honoring ourselves in a way that is aligned to our purpose, our individual presence, our individual power, who is really holding up who in these family relationships? If we're not showing up in a sovereign way, we're all kind of crumbling in the name of enmeshment and repeated patterns. Anyways, I digress. Okay. I do think it is so essential when you feel pulled by someone else's storm, a mood, a silence, a projection, envision the glass wall between them and you. Pause and ask yourself, what emotion is mine to feel and what isn't? And leave it at that, because it's not your job to rescue everyone from their weather. But it is your job to notice when you've left your own body trying. Your only job is to stay in alignment to who you are, your purpose, your presence, and honoring that. And we can do that in love. That's exactly what I did. And I even, in that moment, I put myself in her shoes and I'm like, this absolutely sucks. Like, this sucks. I would be frustrated too. But emotional sovereignty says, I'm aware of all of this, right? I'm accountable to my decision. And just because others are reacting or whatever's unfolding, that's not going to change my decision. It's not going to pull me out of my centeredness and this knowing that I know who I am. I know what's right for me. The emotionally sovereign heart says, you guys, I can be with your pain without abandoning my peace. I can love you deeply and still return home to myself. And the more we practice that, the more we learn that love doesn't require enmeshment. It requires presence. It asks us to stay centered and true to ourselves, even as we open up to someone else. I used to think that wasn't possible. Now I know it's the new way to love fully, freely, and fiercely. So, here's my reflection question for you, and exactly what I've been sitting with over the last week, which has honestly brought up some interesting answers and moments of clarity and rewriting for me. So here's the reflection question that I've been using. When was the last time you chose yourself without closing your heart? And let that just echo through, the chambers and memories of your own relationships, past and present. Because the way we love is the blueprint for how we lead. which is exactly what we'll be talking more about next week in episode 19, Creative Sovereignty, The Way of Leading. I'm wishing you all the most beautiful week, and be sure to stay tuned on our IG for announcements regarding the Mirrored Muse live event. Thank you so much for trusting me with your time today, for joining this conversation moment, this mirror and movement of remembering. Feel free to keep this conversation going in the comments, and if this episode moved or sparked something within you, I'd be so honored and jazzed if you'd subscribe to the podcast, share it, leave a review, or maybe just invite a friend into the conversation. You can also join our Radiant community on Instagram at The Mirrored Muse, where you'll find more reflections, resources, announcements, and events. So be sure to give us a follow to stay in the know. And until next time, stay wild, stay soft, and never forget, you are the muse.